Hey everybody, quick preface before we begin. This video turned out way more long-winded than I was originally expecting it to be, so if you don't want to listen to me ramble about the same cards over and over again for like an hour, maybe this isn't your video. I really don't care about views and stuff on this channel. I'm just trying to have a good time talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff, but maybe you'll enjoy it. So it's just like more of a podcast, I would say, type video. I mean, obviously I'm showing things on the screen, but you can kind of infer what I'm talking about just via listening. So maybe if you're in a car ride, this would be good like podcast style video. Just throwing that out there. It's a bit long-winded. You don't necessarily need to see this, the video itself as we go through this. So enjoy. What's up everybody, Grace here. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be looking at some deck lists from some recent tournaments. Just a couple weeks ago we had the GOAT Format World Championship. That's the biggest tournament of the year for GOATs. And then just this past weekend we had a Patreon World Championship qualifier with the first invite of the season for the 2024 World Championship got handed out, which is really cool. And so let's look at some decks. I just want to talk a little bit about it, see if maybe there's any interesting trends that are developing, any interesting card choices. I know especially with the World Championship, there was a lot of decks that look really similar, but at the same time, I think there is something interesting to glean from them. I want to mention, of course, that, I'm not the expert on a lot of this, especially when it comes to Chaos Turbo. Maybe I need to bring an expert onto one of these videos sometime. So this is just all my conjecture. My goal with this channel, with this video specifically, is to help kind of bridge the gap between people that are, casually observing GOAT format and kind of showing this competitive side of the game, where there's a lot of just fantastic duelists competing at a high level. Sometimes I get comments on my videos from, either trolls or people that genuinely don't understand GOAT format, that talk about the format as skillless, or how is there a tournament for a format that has Trinity in it? And those are all great. It's a good question, honestly. I can definitely see why people would wonder that. Like, how is there actual, format revolving around Yu-Gi-Oh! That plays delinquent duo and stuff? But at the end of the day, over a large sample size, the best players prevail. We've seen it time and time and time and time again. Over a big enough sample size, better players win. There is plenty of room for skill expression in GOAT format. That is why the best players are always at the top. So, without further ado, let's look at some decks. Let's first talk about the GOAT Format World Championship. All right, we saw a lot of Chaos Turbo, so I'm going to skip through some of this, but at the same time, if I see something interesting, I'm going to point it out. And as always, I'm not an expert on this. This is just my opinion. If I see something interesting, I'm going to point it out. My reasoning for it might be wrong. I might miss something else that's cool. This is just me taking a look at these, and I really haven't dug into many of these decks quickly yet. So we're going to go through all top 32. Like I said, I'm going to skip through a lot of them. But some of them that are interesting, I'll point out. First is Wavement, GGP champion Wavement, great duelist, one of the first persons to popularize this the person to popularize this relinquished chaos, not the control version of relinquished, but the pure chaos version of relinquished, and he ended up not playing it at the World Championship. I am curious as his reasoning to that. Maybe he was anticipating a bit more aggro. I know the relinquished strategy can struggle a bit against the aggressive matchup, so he decided to go with a more standard Chaos Turbo. One thing that's not standard in this list is the triple Book of Moon in the main deck. I'd be really curious to hear kind of his reasoning for running the triple book. I'm not 100% sure, because book typically, in my opinion, is not as good in the mirror match, and this deck seems pretty heavily catered to the mirror with the triple wing blast. But book has its uses. You can reset your flips. It's just a very versatile card. I also wonder too if this is kind of some sort of preparation for the aggro matchup, because in certain situations with Turbo, when you're playing and you say your opponent has a Blade Knight on board and you have a Dekoichi that is never going to resolve because of the Blade Knight, you can summon the Dekoichi and attack and book his Blade Knight. So I don't know, certain things like that might come up. So I'm curious about the triple book, how it worked out for him. Next, we go to Tight End 7890, another pretty standard Turbo list. We see a Spirit Reaper in the main deck, tons of Spirit Reapers in the main in these Turbo lists. Really, my opinion on Spirit Reaper. This is just, like I said, my opinion. It's one of those cool cards that allows you to be aggressive and is a great defensive option as well. Any card that can rip something from somebody's hand is going to be good into almost every matchup, but Spirit Reaper is especially good because like I said, you can get aggressive with it, you can force out battle traps, you can rip cards from people's hands, but at the same time, you can wall up with it against the more aggressive strategies. And that's really similar to Gravekeeper Spy. I think that's why we're seeing both of these cards in so many people's decks at the moment, because they're really versatile. They allow you to be aggressive, or they allow you to be defensive and wall up against the aggressive strategy. So, and it's a pretty easy way to get darks into the grave, because they're going to have to answer it. And if they don't, you're going to make them go minus. And if they do, you get a dark into the grave. So rest of this kind of standard. Interesting seeing the Jinzo in the side as well as the Hollowed Life Barrier. I believe that's what that is in the side. So next we go to Shifty. Shifty got second place playing Earth aggro. Really cool to see Earth make such a deep run at this event. I'm not gonna act like I'm Nostradamus or anything, but I did kind of anticipate Earth to do well. I was expecting the Earth to do well from some of the people that have played a lot of Earth that qualified for the World Championship, such as Daylor, I believe, is a duelist who plays a lot of Earth that qualified for Worlds. He was one of my kind of sleeper picks. But ultimately, Shifty made a really deep run, second place, playing the Earth strategy. I saw him mention at one point that this deck wasn't as refined. He kind of threw it together at the last second. So we see no giant rats. That seems to be the trend lately in the Earth aggro strategy, is the giant rats are kind of coming out of the deck. Just because those floaters are sometimes a bit slow, they require too much setup, they're very often not going to resolve. But you don't want cards that are immediately good right away. So like I said, I'm not an expert on Earth type stuff either, but all of this stuff seems pretty good, pretty standard. The one Magician of Faith in the main deck, man, it's crazy how one little innovation can really shape up a format that's been around for so long. I mean, we recently saw a few months ago, maybe even a year ago or so at this point, where Jonathan LeBounty, one of the greatest GOAT format duelists, great warrior player, started teching a Magician of Faith in the main deck of warriors, and it seemed to become a staple in almost every aggressive deck. At least one Magician of Faith in the main deck really catches people off guard, and it's starting to find its way into the Earth strategy. I know Florida Man Pile was pioneered by or played by Shaggy Powers at a GGP recently, to I think a top 4 or second place finish or something, playing Earth with a little bit of control stuff as well as the Magician of Faiths in the main deck. So the rest of this is pretty standard if you've played Earth or know kind of how the deck works. So but great deck. If you're getting new into GOAT format and you want to pick up some quick, easy beat down wins, this might be your deck. And I think there is a bit more nuance here than just summon Gigantes, attack for 1900. I think there's plenty of nuance to this deck and some skill expression to be had here. So congrats to Shifty. Next, we have Sesto, and this deck is very, very interesting. So this is Thunder Dragon Chaos Control. I really haven't, like I said, I haven't looked at a lot of these decks recently, so I'm kind of taking a look and seeing what stands out right away. So, we haven't seen Thunder Dragon Chaos Control do incredibly well this season, but it always seems to pop up at the World Championships. Last year, I believe there were 2 Thunder Dragon Chaos Control players in the top 4 at the 2022 World Championship, if I'm remembering correctly. But it looks kind of standard for, Thunder Dragon Chaos Control. I'm trying to see if there's anything notable that sticks out. Of course, the, Zabord being, pretty popular right now, running the full triple meta, triple scapegoat, giving themselves their best chance of having these cards at the same time together. I find Creature Swap to be really good right now, and I also think Royal Decree is incredibly underrated at the moment, maxing out at 3, just to make sure that his plays go through, and because of the low trap count, you can afford to run the Decree. I feel like Decree is a bit slept on at the moment, I guess. Only certain decks can run it, but at the same time, I feel like I've seen more and more recently the trap count on Chaos Turbo's lists going up, especially post-board, games 2 and 3 against aggressive decks. You'll see players, great duelists like Ghost Rider and others, who bring in these whole additional trap lineups, games 2 and 3 against the aggressive strategies. Not that he would do that against, control, but I think there's trends that we can, find ways to exploit. And I feel like games 2 and 3, typically Turbo is siding into more traps than in the past. I could be wrong. Like, I don't know that for a fact. I'm just, talking out my ass. So anyway, I think Decree's still really, really good. And this card has grown on me a lot if you've seen my channel, and I think kind of underrated in decks like this at the moment. So congrats to Sesto to getting it done playing this deck. I mean, you got to realize playing control type strategies, it's going to be an uphill battle, especially against a heavy Turbo field, and he must have had to play really well. I mean, you really got to grind out wins. There's nothing that's really free with a deck like this. So the one thing I will point out though that's interesting is because the Decree, I haven't seen a ton of Decree in Thunder Dragon Chaos Control now that I think about it. I've seen Decree in variants of Goat Control, but I am curious about the Thunder Dragons because there are no like discard cards outside of Tribe. So that's interesting. I am curious if it's worth running all of these, but he would rather run the Thunder Dragons than be forced into playing like Shining Angels or something. So I don't know. Makes sense. Interesting list. Yeah. Next, we go to Raikoko 7, notably a great, Edison duelist. So this looks pretty standard to me. Pretty standard Chaos Turbo, kind of in a weird ordering. But, congrats to Raikoko. You see the one Raigeki break, one Wing Blast ratio instead of, kind of hedging the bets against both. There's running one of each, which is pretty cool. Rest of this looks pretty standard. So next we go to Ray Saber. Ray Saber, one of my former teammates in the War League. This man's a monster. Really underrated duelist. Won the SGC championship. I don't remember what it was. In Italy a few months ago. Large field, I believe like 200 players or something like that. He got first place playing Chaos Turbo. It's pretty much all he plays. And, I know he can play Warriors as well, but he's just a great duelist. I've watched a lot of his matches from the time in the War League, and especially the Turbo Mirror match. I feel like he has a really great feel for it, which you have to succeed in Go format. Running the triple Reaper. I wonder how he felt about these Reapers, if they performed for him, if it was too much having all three, or if he'd run 6 if he could. Very interesting. Cutting down on one of the Dekoichis to make room, only running 2 Spies, interestingly enough, in the main deck of Turbo. So this deck is a bit interesting, I would say, especially running the Triple Reaper. I wonder how that worked out for him. I'm sure it definitely helped, shore up his matchup against the aggressive decks. But I wonder if it was, maybe too much or not enough. I don't know. Interesting to see. I know typically I've seen Ray Saber side into the kind of control package games 2 and 3 when he plays Turbo, but it didn't look like that was happening this time. We're seeing triple walk, not playing around with Burm, and the Hollowed Life Barrier again. Interesting tech. Next we go to Purple Drunk, another fine Italian duelist. Pretty standard, Chaos Turbo list, I'd say. Interesting seeing just one goat, one meta in the side. I'm curious. I mean, I assume probably brings those in against the aggro matchups, but I saw there's another deck we'll look at that has one goat, one meta, and I'm curious about that because I feel like, sometimes, these are cards that are hard. The trouble with meta goats sometimes is that you don't draw those cards in combination, and running just 1 and 1, I feel like it really decreases your chance of drawing them in combination. But Purple Drunk's a much more proficient duelist than I am, so I'm sure he has a good reasoning for it. So. Next, we go to Pot the Master. Looks like another pretty standard Chaos Turbo list. Moving on. Now we go to Payday 17, or Paid 17, or Payday 17. I don't know. I believe he is Italian as well. I actually, in one of my chances that I got pretty close to getting my invite this season was the Patreon that Paid won. I lost to him in the losers finals, I believe. He was playing Reasoning Gates, and I just got absolutely smoked by Jinzo and the whole Reasoning Gate thing. I'm not an expert on this deck, but everything looks fairly standard for the most part. Not running any level 5s, not doing the Stein stuff, but this is kind of just your standard monster lineup for Reasoning Gate. Trying to see if there's anything else that really sticks out, doing the tune table stuff as well. So kind of standard. This is one of the more consistent variations of this deck I've seen before. Spell Canceller in the side can be really good in the mirror match, can also be good against Turbo in the right situations, decrees, bring those in against the trap heavy decks. And yeah, looks pretty solid. Reasoning Gate does what it does. Yeah. Another thing I'll say real quick about Reasoning Gate, and I might have mentioned this before in other videos, this deck is surprisingly difficult to play. I feel like newer players can pick it up and do well with it because sometimes this deck just sacks. I mean, it just, sometimes you hit the, you hit the DMOC off the monster gate and you just win. But I think there are some games where you really have to grind out wins. So I definitely fear a skilled Reasoning Gate player quite a bit. I mean, the random on ladder that you run into, I'm not too concerned, but somebody like Payday or Paid 17, definitely don't want to play against them on this deck. Next, we have NB96, another fairly standard kind of turbo list. He's running the kind of, like I said, Ghost Rider type side where we're really increasing the trap count, potentially games 2 and 3. Siding in triple Dust and triple Saku. I assume the Saku, Widespread Ruin stuff that's coming in against aggro. I wonder what the Dusts are for. Not 100% sure if that's aggro or if it's against the mirror match. There's a lot of metagaming that goes on, and especially at the World Championship because it's all the highest level players. There's lots of kind of, metagaming with the side deck and interesting card choices that come in because people are trying to take advantage of trends, right? If we see that this person's siding into this card every single time, then I'm going to side into a card that counters that card, but at the same time, that makes the deck less consistent, and then somebody might try to counter that. There's a lot that goes into it. So I'm curious. I see turbo players sometimes siding Dusts games 2 and 3. Like I said, I'm not a turbo expert. So maybe somebody could explain what matchups those come in against. Next, we have Moxies. This is our first warrior list, pure warrior list. It made it to the top 32. Moxie's a fantastic warrior player, great duelist in general with a very, full repertoire of GOAT format tops. So this list looks like pretty standard warriors, really, in my opinion, minus the Jar of Greeds in the main deck. We don't always see those, but really just sticking with the bread and butter deck, the consistency, making sure that everything's running as smoothly as possible. I imagine he had a decent time against a lot of the turbo decks in the format with this version of the deck. It was interesting. I will talk a little bit about kind of some of the aggro decks that did do well. Like I said, in the top 32, we're mostly looking at Chaos Turbo. It seemed like aggro did not have as good of a showing. It seems like there's a lot of duelists that typically, not a lot, but there are some duelists that typically play aggro that decided to go turbo. And so I really think like there was just a lot of people that brought turbo to the tournament, more than I really expected. And I kind of made a video previously about this whole, Zaborg pile, thunderclap thing, whatever you want to call it, that's started to emerge, and we really did not see much of that at all. The warrior players that did well were playing very standard lists, similar to what Moxies ran. Triple Dust Shoot, really making sure to shore up that turbo matchup, as well as the double Kaiku, triple Blade Knight. We've seen, warrior players kind of going away from that as well, running usually 2 Blade Knights and maybe a flip or something along those lines. I mean, he's not even on the one Magician of Faith. This is purely to make sure that knocks are dead game 1, which I think is a good strategy at this point. We see these aggressive strategies kind of going 2 different routes. We have this route like this, that's, the more kind of standard, blanks all of your knocks games 1, and then we have the kind of more flip heavy variants that are doing well. And I like the kind of idea of either committing to one or the other. And so no flips as well, games 2 and 3 at all, besides the one Magician of Faith, which is interesting to see. So really making sure to make the knocks dead, because nowadays we see more and more often, I play a lot of warriors myself, so I know this, that sometimes people will keep in a knock or 2, games 2 or 3, knowing that you're, typically going to side into Faiths and Reapers and Spies and stuff like that. So really making sure to keep the knocks dead, games 2 and 3, very smart deck building by Moxies. It is interesting to see this Goblin attack force in the side deck. I'm curious where that comes in, maybe against Turbo as an out to Chaos Sorcerer, potentially. I'm not 100% sure, but the rest of this looks, kind of fairly standard for a warrior side. Next, we get to MMF, another great duelist. Yeah, it looks fairly standard. Triple Jar Greed in the main deck, triple Raigeki Break. Really, when we look at Chaos Turbo, decks. We're seeing what sticks out, what's interesting. Really, the main thing is, kind of the monster lineup and the trap lineup. Usually the monster lineup's fairly standard, but we're seeing these Reapers in the mix, and seeing how they adjust their flip monster ratio with the Reapers in the main deck is, kind of a big deal. That kind of affects things. And then the trap lineups, of course, we see different, ratios on Solemns, on Raigeki Break or Wing Blast, on Jar of Greeds. Like I said, I'm not a turbo expert, so I'm not going to talk a ton on that. We have Mercenary here in the top 32. Looks fairly standard, but once again, we see the Reaper in the main deck, Zambira in the main deck. Interesting seeing the Sakuretsu armor in the main deck, the Battle Trap. I'm surprised. I expected to see more of this lately. I feel like turbo players have really kind of decided, it's basically they're deciding, do we want to shore up more of the aggressive matchup, or are we preparing more for the mirror match? And cards like Sakuretsu are obviously better against warriors, and it's kind of, how do you want to hedge your bets? Do you want to go with some Reapers in the main deck to kind of shore up your matchup against warriors, or do you want to do it in the trap lineup with a teched Sakuretsu armor? Things like that. So kind of interesting to see the one Saku in the main, one Dust Shoot in the main. We're kind of out of this really heavy Dust Shoot meta, I think, at the moment at least. I think go back 2-3 months, we were seeing triple Dust Shoot in almost every single list. And we saw turbo players do well in this tournament with running just 1 or 2 Dust Shoots in the main deck. Once we get to our winning duelist deck, you'll see that as well. So solid turbo list. Now we get to some burn. Nice to see some burn in the top tables with Maru 13 playing the Panda burn strategy. Not an expert on burn either, so can't comment a ton on this. But this does seem to be the variation that runs the koalas. It looks all pretty solid, standard for the most part. When we look at burn decks, we typically look at if they're running the chain energies in the main deck or not. This has it in the side, so certain matchups Maru will bring the chain energies in against, which is interesting to see. Maybe depending on whether he's going first or second, that can play a big role. But overall, it's burn. It does what it does. And also, you see the Nightmare Wheels. Sometimes those are not in the main deck. Sometimes those are sided or not included in the list at all. So there's different variations on burn, just depending on what card choices are used. But for the most part, there's nothing crazy here. But congrats to Maru for bringing burn to Worlds. All right, next we get to Marcus, who's been on a tear recently. I believe recently won a GGP and has just played really well. I've watched a few replays. Just a really, really good duelist, and has some interesting takes on different matchups and strategies. I believe he had a video with JDZ where he sat down and talked about some GOAT format theory. So check that out if you're interested, on GOAT Format's YouTube channel. Obviously, shout out to goatformat.com. That's where I'm getting all of these deck lists. They're the ones who run this tournament. It wouldn't happen without them. So this is all on the GOAT Format website. So check it out. So what's interesting to me about this deck, it kind of looks like standard turbo right off the bat. Triple Solemn Judgment in the main deck, which I haven't seen in a while. We see the one Trap Dust Shoot, like I kind of mentioned earlier. Double Tsukiyomi, which is interesting, especially because he's only running one Dekoichi. So I don't know. I like Tsukiyomi a lot against aggro. It's not as good against Earth aggro, but against standard warriors, Tsukiyomi is really good. But I can imagine that the double Tsukiyomi is to do, Tsukiyomi typical stuff, as well as synergizing well with this one creature swap in the main deck, which is a really cool tech to see in here. And I'm starting to see some players teching a creature swap or siding a creature swap. I helped someone test for the World Championship. That's a really great retro format duelist who I saw messing around with some creature swap stuff. I think there's some potential here. I'm not exactly sure why this is starting to emerge now, or but I do feel like creature swap is really good because you can use your there's a ton of targets in turbo. Like you don't see anything that sticks out right off the bat, because typically you imagine creature swap being used in more of a goat control type strategy. But there's tons of stuff that you can swap. You can swap the Tsukiyomi, obviously, but you can swap your Serpent, your Sankin. You can swap used up flip monsters like Faiths and Spies and stuff. And you do this at the right time. If you use a Magician of Faith, and then your opponent has a Faith set, and you send them your used Faith and you take their Faith, it can be just incredibly backbreaking for your opponent. So there's a ton of cool interactions with creature swaps. Very interesting to see that in the main deck. I think we might see that more in the future. And he's got a second one in the side, which is pretty cool. Seeing a Jowgen in here, but I think we've seen a little of that earlier. One goat to help, kind of, I assume this is for aggro matchups, reasoning gate, stuff like that, and also synergize as well with the creature swaps. So congrats to Marcus. Now we go to Marcus Hayden, YCS champion. Pretty standard turbo list, I would say. This is kind of a very clean looking trap ratio to me. This is kind of what you see recently: the double Raigeki break, double discard trap, double solemn, double dust shoot. I'm a big fan of 2 ofs in the trap lineup. That's just me personally, but it looks really, really standard. I would say what's not standard is we're seeing this more and more. People, like I said, we see very often against aggressive decks that people playing turbo will typically side into extra battle traps, like we see with the Sakuretsu armors here, dust tornadoes or solemn judgments or stuff like that. But we're starting to see some of these turbo players going back to siding into these control packages where if you go back a few months, I would say that 95% of turbo players were not siding like this, but now I think the number is up to 30-40%. We're seeing turbo siding these control packages against aggressive decks. And personally, as an aggro player, I would way rather deal with extra battle traps. I think there's ways to deal with them. There's ways to play through them. You have dust tornadoes, and I like playing cards like Seven Tools and Solemn Judgments and stuff to protect your monsters. But I do not want to play against turbo that's siding into control personally. They can brick on them, obviously, but getting through scapegoat tokens is always just such a battle with warriors if you don't have the right tools to do so. And typically you're not going to be prepared for these cards games 2 and 3. So it's cool seeing that kind of reemerge again. So congrats to Marcus. Next up, your world champion, Ludovico Rizzo. Congratulations to Ludo. Getting the GOAT format world championship title to your name is not an easy feat. It should not be taken lightly. I mean, getting your invite to the World Championship is not an easy feat in itself, and then you head into this stacked field full of GOAT format's best duelists who have played this format for years, for close to a decade now. Some players have even played it as far back as in the actual format itself. It's been around for a long time. There's people that know this game inside and out. I mean, you play against some of these high-level players, you'll see what I'm talking about, the way that they can grind out small advantages through mind games, through reads, through, kind of just knowing what you potentially have. There's a ton that goes into this game. Like I said, I believe there is a lot of skill expression in this format. And so Ludo proved that he has what it takes to be the world championship. Obviously, he's fantastic in many different formats, great Edison duelist as well, and other formats. But he did it here in the GOAT Format World Championship. So major congratulations to Ludo. He earned this title. So let's look at the list. Pretty standard Chaos Turbo, I would say, for the most part. A little heavier on the kind of spell lineup than we've seen. And from other Turbo players, I think we've typically seen something like 10 traps, but he's running 7. No Solemn Judgments in the main deck, rather going with 1 Jar, the double Wing Blast, and the 1 Dust Shoot. We saw a lot at the end of the day. A lot of these players that did well were not on multiple copies of Dust Shoot. Now, the other thing to point out is the control package, just like we saw from the previous deck list with Marcus. We see the Scapegoat meta package in here. I believe Ludo didn't play against a ton of warriors, but the ones that he did, it kind of came in handy. Like I said, I would rather face battle traps than face a control package games 2 and 3 against Turbo. That's just my opinion, though. And the other thing that is quite interesting to me is the triple decree in the side deck. Very cool. I really, really like this. I think this is very interesting. I know he said he really didn't use it much because he didn't play against a ton of aggressive strategies, but I have to talk about this a little bit because I've kind of been theorizing some of this myself, that as we see these turbo decks increase their trap counts games 2 and 3, that we could potentially see some interesting things where Decree comes in games 2 and 3 against certain matchups, whether that is aggro, whether that is turbo, kind of the more Solemn Judgment heavy style of turbo like we saw a few lists ago. So there's different ways that this card can be played. It's very interesting to see in the side, and I know he mentioned in an interview, go check out a True Heroes interview with Ludo after the World Championship. He talked a little bit about this card and said it was somewhat against the mirror match, games 2 and 3 potentially in the top 32 cut because they wouldn't expect it, and stuff like that is what sets apart good duelists from great ones. So congrats to Ludo, you're world champion. Next we go to Leo P. Hunsho, Pushin' P, who plays pretty much this deck. I mean, if you know Leo P, you know that he's mostly on Decree, Goat Control, and he's just uber consistent with this. Always topping, always doing well. So major congrats to Leo P. I also think this is not an easy deck to pilot well. This is a deck that requires you to grind out wins. This is a deck that is quite difficult to play at a high level, and he seems to execute it every time. So there's tons of ways that you can take Goat Control. It's one of the things I think is kind of cool still in this format is the players that stick to playing Goat Control, they have tons of different ways. They're always changing it up and doing different things. So we see kind of a lot of one-ofs in the monster lineup. We see this Borg, of course, Kaiku, Sure Priest, all the good one-of cards. We see Lily a lot in Goat Control nowadays, allowing players to get aggressive at the right times. Triple Magician of Faith. You run such a heavy spell lineup that having multiple faiths can sometimes be really good, especially with double Tsukiyomi. There's times against Goat Control, especially if they stick a Decree so you don't have a way to answer it, that they can loop faith and just card advantage you out of the game before you really even get a chance to play, which is pretty cool. So yeah, just a kind of standard Goat Control list from here. Triple Goats, triple meta. And of course the triple Decree, which I think is pretty good at the moment. Triple Dust Shoot in the side. So I would assume against a deck like Ludo's, he would take out these Decrees, bring in the Dust Shoots, games 2 and 3, which is interesting to see. Bringing in the Rhoda, the package, games 2 and 3 potentially against certain matchups, or they bring in the Mystic Swordsman level 2, the Exiled, the Archer, and the Zaborgs or Zambiras, excuse me. And then the Panda in the side, which is kind of cool. I have seen this from certain Italian duelists who like to bring this in against the Control Mirror match because it comes in at a hefty attack point and does a lot of damage. So kind of not expected. And typically against Control, people are gonna not be really heavily siding battle traps and stuff. So. And we also see the Spies in the main deck. I want to point that out. That's not always something you see in Goat Control because it can sometimes conflict with the scapegoats themselves. But at the same time, Leo P is a good enough duelist that it wouldn't come up in most scenarios, I wouldn't imagine. So shout out to him. I love seeing people playing this deck. And Leo P is a great duelist on the Goat strategy. Next, we go to Kit, who has had quite a season playing the Chaos Turbo strategy here. Everything looks fairly standard for the most part. We're seeing that kind of 10 trap lineup. Yeah, everything looks pretty standard. Congratulations to Kit. Alrighty, next we get to KC Philosophos. I'm sorry, that was absolutely horrible. Playing the Chaos Turbo strategy. Seeing double Book of Moon in the main deck, interesting. Like I said, I saw Wavement earlier running the 3, the Spirit Reaper in the main, and because of that, you have to kind of cut down on other monsters in different areas. So we see 2 Dekoichis, just 2 Spies. Seems to be kind of an interesting trend I'm seeing in some of these decks is people cutting down on the 3rd Spy. There's no Tsukiyomi in the main deck, I noticed of this. So just another take on the Chaos Turbo deck. I think pretty much everything is kind of standard. We see the Needle Ceiling in the side, which could be interesting in the right scenario. Very cool to see that tucked in there. So congratulations. Alrighty, now we get to Juve89, who great Italian duelist, has a lot of success in this format, many multiple tops, playing different types of decks, and for the World Championship, he decided to bring a Chaos Recruiter strategy, which I think is super cool. This is probably my favorite deck in the top cut that I've seen. I've been working on some stuff like this, kind of similar ideas here in the background just for fun, and it's seeing how they do kind of running like a Chaos Recruiter build with Decrees in the main. I've been talking about how good I think Decree is at the moment, and so I feel like a Chaos Recruiter deck with Decrees could be really good, especially because Recruiters have become better and better recently with all of these mind controls that are being played in the main deck, with all of these Zombiras that are being played. Like your recruiters are so what, you attacked your Zombira into my tomato, now I just get my Sanguine, which is going to get my Sinister or Faith or whatever I need to get. So this is really cool. I am very glad to see this strategy do well, and I believe Juve made a pretty deep run in this tournament. So yeah, congrats to him. So we see the BLS double Sorc, which is very interesting looking at this, because in my kind of version of this deck, I only run one Sorcerer because he's very low on the light count, especially if your Faith gets knocked or something like that. But he must have been pretty confident that he was going to be able to get lights into the grave, and it surely worked out for him. He definitely knows more of what he's doing than I would with something like this. So yeah, we see like I said, the double Sorc BLS, the one Shining Angel. It's always interesting to me, the Shining Angel, because in a deck like this, you need lights. That's usually where you're lacking, is the lights. There's tons of great dark monsters we know between Reaper and Spy and Tsukiyomi and Sanguine, but like, figuring out what light monsters to play is very interesting. We saw, in a previous list, that Thunder Dragon Chaos Control deck that did really good was running the Thunder Dragons without any discard traps, just basically acknowledging, like, I'm not going to get as much value out of these Thunder Dragons as something like Chaos Turbo does, but at the same time, just gets lights into the grave quickly. Juve deciding to go with the Shining Angel. I am curious on the ratio. You run one Angel, one DD Warrior Lady. That's always interesting to me, because if you draw... you have a 50% chance of drawing the Warrior Lady before you draw the Angel, so then the Angel doesn't do anything, I don't think. So yeah, I don't know. I'm interested on the 1-in-1. It worked out for him. He knows what he's doing more than I do, so but I am a little curious about that. Double Faith, double Zaborg. Like I said, I think Zaborg is really good right now against Chaos Turbo. Not right now. It's always been good against Chaos Turbo. The deck just has to be built right and catered to the meta that can support it. One Sanguine, double Spirit Reaper, double Tomato. This package is very powerful. It's slowing down aggressive decks, as well as you have a lot of utility with the Tomato in a deck like this, especially because you run triple Spy. You can sometimes search the Spy if they attack into it. If it's the last monster that attacks into it, you can search the Spy, and then on your turn, turn it to defense and wall up. Same, you can search out Reaper and wall up. You can search out Reaper and get aggressive. You can search out Sanguine as a great tribute fodder for the Borg next turn. So there's tons of cool plays that Tomato opens in this deck. And of course, it allows you to support these creature swaps, and we'll get to that. Triple Spy, one Tsukiyomi, one Kaiku, Tribe, Sinister. So everything else is, kind of standard in the spell lineup, minus, of course, the creature swaps. Interesting. Like I said, I just think Creature Swap is a very cool card. I think it's really good right now. Obviously, it's great in these kind of Chaos Recruiter strategies, because you have a ton of ways to tons of good swap targets between your used up flip monsters, your Sinister, your Sanguine, your Tomatoes. You can always do, Shining Angel, creature swap type stuff. The only thing I've noticed that is sometimes a problem with creature swap playing against Turbo is because they're running Raigeki Break and Phoenix Wing Blast. If you don't have two monsters on board, like two good potential swap targets, sometimes you'll swap and you try to give them your Tomato and you're trying to take their flip or their Chaos Sorcerer or something, and then they Wing Blast your Tomato. It really makes you go minus and doesn't feel very good. And so I do feel like that's kind of some of the concern sometimes. But at the same time, it worked out for Juve 89. Running the double Minecon, really, like I said, this deck is definitely catered towards winning that Turbo match. But at the same time, plenty of good tools to use against Warriors. Basically, this whole line of cards right here is all pretty good against Warrior. So creature swap's cool. The one goats, one meta. I don't understand this. There has to be a reason for it. But it worked out. Very interesting to see the one goat, one meta. It does make sense. Meta. You can not even run the goat. The meta works because you have so many ways to get to Sinister quickly. With the Tomato, helps you get there quicker because it gets you Sanguine, which can get you Sinister in a pinch if you need. So I don't know. It makes sense, I guess. And then of course the Scapegoat can synergize with these creature swaps really well. I definitely like using Scapegoat creature swap more than using like a Tomato creature swap because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. And then double Decree. I think Decree's great right now in the main deck. Really cool to see. The side looks all kind of standard type stuff. The third Decree, smashing, Zombiras. The problem with running Decree sometimes against aggro is a really good, siding strategy against aggro is to bring in extra battle traps, but you can't do that if you're running Decree. So he's opting to go with the double smashing Zombira type stuff against aggro, which makes sense. So I love this deck. I think it's really cool. Congrats to Juve89. Next, we have John Wick playing the Chaos Turbo strategy. Looks fairly standard for the most part, but of course, congrats to John Wick. Anybody that made day 2 on this tournament had to really grind it out. So, yep. Next, we get to Grumple. Sorry, this is a little blurry. I talk quite a bit of theory with Grumple on a few different decks and ideas and stuff. He think he's really onto something here, and I'm really surprised we didn't see more people playing this. This is that Thunderclap deck, and he's been the person kind of at the forefront of playing this deck and doing well with it. We see obviously the doubles on Byra in the main deck, which is awesome to see. Of course, the triple spy. What is interesting is in some decks like this, sometimes you see the Koichis or tomatoes or something like that. We see none of that. Really just one, Sangan, double Blade Knight. So you're running this aggro deck that can get defensive if it needs to at the right time. One DD Assailant, which is kind of interesting in the main deck. I'm curious what that's for. So one Bottomless Trap Hole in the main, which is neat. We're seeing that kind of emerge a bit more recently, which is cool. Yeah, just a very cool list. Try this out if you're interested. This is, like I said, that kind of Thunderclap pile type deck. There's tons of variations, different ways you can play this deck. Triple Solemn Judgments, triple Trap Dust Shoots, kind of your kind of standard stun aggro type trap lineup, running the Zing Jar package, which is cool to see. The second Bottomless in the side. So yeah, just overall very cool list. Like I said, I'm surprised we didn't see more lists like this, but people decided to kind of just go with the standard Chaos for the most part to kind of give themselves the best chance. But yeah, congrats to Grumple for the top. Alrighty, now we get to Gia76. Great duelist. I really like this deck. I think this is very cool. My kind of version of Warriors that I've been playing with recently looks kind of similar to something like this. It's definitely committing to the flip side of things and playing the best flips and playing them and playing a deck that really helps support them, but allowing you to get aggressive at the same time. So the one thing, we'll point out some interesting things. First, the triple spy in the main deck. I know sometimes when people are playing spy and warriors, we see just 2, but there's 3 here. There's 3 in Grumple's list as well, so that seems to be a thing. Double faith, typically in these warrior decks, we're seeing just 1 faith. Gia going all in on the double faith. You run a lot of good spells in the warrior deck. You can sometimes reuse your Rhoda and other good stuff like that, so it makes sense. And yeah, I'm sure catches a lot of people off guard. So 2 faith in the main to help you recycle your power spells. 1 Spirit Reaper, like I said, kind of like Spy in the way that it's defensive but allows you to get offensive at the same time. People don't just underrate these cards. Like I said, their versatility. You flip Spy, you get another Spy, you have 2400 damage, and then sometimes you'll have your normal summon on top of that. You can summon a Reaper or a Kaiku or a Blade Knight or DD Warrior Lady to get in there for just a ton of damage. And all of these plays are backed up by a triple solemn double 7 tools, which is really, really cool. I really like that. The rest of the monster lineup, fairly standard. Spells are kind of standard. Double 7 tools in the main deck. I love this. I think this card is awesome. I've played it quite a bit in, if you've seen some of my other videos where I play Warriors, I typically have sided 1 7 tools before and bring it in against other solemn decks. But in the main deck at a 2 is I've never seen before. I think it's really cool. I think it really allows you to get very aggressive, allows you to, sometimes you want to summon a second monster when you're playing Warriors, but you have to kind of have this debate in your mind of is it worth solemning if my opponent torrentials or mirror forces or something like that, where you don't feel guilty about torrential or about using 7 tools on their torrential or something like that. So it also allows you to win the kind of solemn wars in the mirror match and get your opponent very low very quickly against other solemn type decks. So I really like this list. Very, very cool. Shout out to Gia76, a great duelist. She earned it. Next, we go to Geist D playing the Thunder Dragon Chaos Control strategy. This one, unlike the other Thunder Dragon Chaos Control list, we don't see any decrees in the main deck, electing to go with the discard trap, electing to go with the more robust trap lineup, which is good to see as well. Bunch of good standard 1-ofs, 1 Sork, 1 BLS, the 2 Spies, 2 Faiths. It's definitely interesting seeing these different spy ratios in some of these different decks. It's It's weird now. We're seeing aggro decks running 3 and control and sometimes turbo running 2, which is interesting from what I've seen so far. The rest of this stuff looks kind of standard for your, Thunder Dragon Chaos control list. The Solemns in the main deck we don't always see in control variations. Maxing out on the triple goats, triple meta, of course the double creature swap. I'm sure put in some good work here. Geist, fantastic duelist as always. Congratulations for the top. Now we go to Fresh IRL. Somebody that I've got to play several times in person. Great duelist, great person, and running the Double Reaper in the main deck. We're seeing this here again. This is, I'd say standard for the most part, but Fresh IRL always has something kind of interesting up its sleeve. We've seen in the past him, popularizing the Golem, strategy, as well as he for a while would run Royal Oppression and Warriors. He can play a lot of different decks and play them well. And what is so interesting to me is obviously the Royal Decree in the main deck, along with a very robust trap lineup. I don't understand this, but I have absolutely no idea what this is all about. I assume it's for certain setups where you basically are just trading 1-for-1 with their Decree, or against like certain warrior decks and stuff where you can make the Decree live and negate more of their stuff than your own stuff. It's very interesting. I'm wonder why he ran the Decree with such a robust trap lineup. It just seems counterintuitive, but he always has a reasoning behind his kind of weird card choices. So I would like to hear Fresh IRL's thoughts on the Decree in the main deck with a pretty robust trap lineup for Turbo. Like I said, we're seeing Turbo really starting to lean on these control packages in the side, as opposed to the pure trap siding in type stuff. Really, what I've seen a lot of looking through these decks is like double meta, double goats, double Saku to kind of make that aggro matchup better. So, congrats to Fresh RL for the top. Now we go to Fabio King at 94. Skip through some of this standard Turbo with the control package in the side once again. Now we go to Dueling High 101, who has been on a tear recently, switching to the warrior strategy and seeing a lot of success. So yeah, definitely big congrats to Dueling High. This looks fairly standard for a warrior list. In my opinion, usually, we're seeing the double Zombira in the main deck, sticking with the kind of knockless version of warriors that we saw from Moxies that really make sure to dodge the knocks games one, running the no flips, no faith in the main deck, nothing. All stuff you're going to be summoning in face-up attack. Really just kind of a standard warrior list, I would say, for the most part, except for, like I said, we've seen the Zombira, double Zombira in the main is not always standard in warriors. And then his siding strategy is kind of similar to what we've seen with a lot of warrior players over the past season, bringing in the spies and the Mobiuses. This is kind of popularized by Lucas and LeBounty and others, bringing in these spies and potentially Reapers to go along with the Mobiuses to pop a bunch of your opponent's battle traps and kind of slow down the pace of play games 2 and 3. So congrats to Dueling High 101 for another recent top. Next is Danny Casey, I believe, number 1 or 2 on ladder at the moment, playing one of those people that you run into quite a bit on ladder, who's very proficient, great duelist, playing the Chaos Turbo strategy. Looks fairly standard for the most part. Skilled Dark Magician in the side is interesting. On to the next. Of course, we have Anthony Alvarado, always a consistent name at the top tables in GOAT format, playing the Chaos Turbo strategy. One thing that's interesting to me is Alvarado he always plays something different. He's one of those people that can just pick up any deck and do really, really well with it. And usually whatever deck he picks is probably the pick to make. Whatever deck is going to be the best at that current event. And he went with Turbo. A lot of players decided to go with Turbo. That's one of the reasons I think we see so many Turbos in the top cut. It's just a lot of players like Anthony who can play a ton of different decks. I mean, we saw him recently top a PWCQ with Warriors just a few weeks ago. Elects to go with Turbo for the World Championships. Looks like a fairly standard list, but doing the same thing as Marcus with the double Tsukiyomi creature swap in the main deck. That's very cool to see. Double Solemn in the main deck. Like I said, these trap lineups are really what makes the difference. Siding into double Scapegoat and another creature swap, but no metas to go along with it, which is also very interesting. I assume it's just to kind of slow down aggro and make your creature swaps go through. Scapegoat's also fantastic. People don't realize against Reasoning Gate and Cat and stuff like that. Not always against Cat, but against Reasoning Gate for the most part. So congrats to Anthony. Next is Ale1997, who has been playing really well recently. 2 triples on Byron in the main for the aggro matchup, as well as doing the control package plus the Sakuretsu armor. So now that I say that, the more I'm looking at this, it seems like the turbo strategy against Warrior is control stuff plus the Sakuretsu armors, and I feel like that's just so potent. I feel like that's going to be very hard for a Warrior player to deal with games 2 and 3. And this siding strategy, a lot of these decks in the top 32 are running stuff like this, and I feel like it probably ate a lot of Warrior players up. I could just imagine. So congrats to Ale. Next, the ever consistent AJT BLS with another GOAT format top, playing Chaos Turbo. One thing also to point out in some of these decks that I didn't really mention, like I said, I'm not a turbo expert, but you see just one Night Assailant in some of these lists. Same with Anthony Alvarado. So that's one of the things. I think AJT is one of the people who's kind of first proponent of playing only one Night Assailant. I guess obviously this is meta dependent and stuff like that, but it seems to become more and more of a thing with good duelists playing the one Night Assailant in the main. Definitely interesting seeing the Berserk Gorilla in the main deck. I'm curious what that's about. I'd love to hear AJT's thoughts on that. I assume maybe to attack back over Kaiku's, maybe to get over Zombiras that are at 1900 to allow you to get aggressive in the right situation. I mean, really the Gorilla in the past I know has been to deal with Kaiku, which is such a problem for Turbo, but at the same time we've seen less Kaiku lately, so I'm curious about the Berserk Gorilla in the main. Just a cool one to help you get really aggressive at the right time. Everything else looks fairly standard. Once again, we see the Spirit Reaper. And of course, when we talk about the Night Assailants, only one of them that obviously kind of intertwines with card destruction being played in the main deck. I didn't really point that out as we were going through this, but some turbo players elected to run double Night Assailant. Typically, if they do that, they're running the card destruction, and typically if there's one Night Assailant, no card destruction. The one Saku in the main deck to kind of shore up the aggro matchup. Interesting to see a tomato in here in the side. I think we've seen that sometimes before, but it can be good against the mirror match when you know your opponent is siding into multiple mind controls to kind of bait the mind control at a certain time. So cool to see. Hollowed Life Barrier once again in the side. So AJT always topping these events. And that is it. That is all 32 deck lists from the GOAT Format World Championship. Listen, I know I was a bit long-winded, so I realize that now, but whatever. Now let's look at this recent Patreon World Championship qualifier, 46 top 8 deck lists. I did play in this event. I went 1 and 2, and it was a blast. I played Fairy Goat Control. It did not go well. Honestly, I've been crushing the ladder with this deck, but I got thrown right into the deep end. I had to play a bunch of control mirrors. This is like my first time playing control in a tournament, and I end up playing against a bunch of control mirrors against great control duelists, and it did not go well. But anyway, it was still fun. Enough about me. Let's get to the people that actually succeeded here in the tournament. And we'll go ahead and start from the bottom. And we will go with Bobby Bodega in 8th place playing the Warrior strategy. Let me zoom out a little bit here. So obviously, as always, shout out to GOAT Format. This is all located on their website. I believe JDZ even did a video going through some of these deck lists, and he probably went into much greater detail than I am, so definitely check out that video if you haven't. Look at Bobby Bodega playing the Warrior strategy. Looks pretty standard for the most part, I would say. I like the one tech smashing in the main. I think that card's kind of good right now with how much Reaper we see everywhere, with how much Zambira we see everywhere, with how much Spy is floating around. So for the most part, pretty standard list. One Compulse on the side, I imagine, for the control matchup, which is pretty cool. So Bobby Bodega with the 8th place. We go to 7th, Anthony Alvarado, once again, playing the Chaos Turbo strategy. A bit different than his list we just looked at a moment ago, where we see the double Night Assailant, we see the card destruction. Like I said, there's some metagaming that goes into the World Championship. These World Championship decks like they're a bit more catered to some sort of sub meta that takes place during the tournament. Whereas, Anthony Alvarado is a great duelist. He knows in a tournament like a Patreon, there's going to be a lot more duelists that are not that high echelon. So he goes with a more standard list typically to kind of, shore up all the different matchups, expecting more jank and weird stuff. Whereas in the World Championship, people are expecting more standard type lists. And so that's why you see some of the weird card choices and stuff like this. But this is a very much more standard Chaos Turbo deck. Once again, running the Ghosts without the metas and the creature swaps to go along with that. Very interesting. Next we get to Yada 88. This deck is so cool. Major shout out to Yada. He's old school duelist, plays a lot of Mataza OTK type stuff, and typically we've seen him top with this deck, but in a more kind of warrior centric version. This is definitely like a more Chaos Turbo-y type version of the deck that I've never seen before, and I'm a little confused by how it works, to be perfectly honest, but very, very cool. I think he had to leave or something, couldn't quite finish the event, but I really love seeing this double tap warrior type stuff in action. I think it's very potent. I think it's very underrated. I think if you take some time to actually learn how to use this deck, how to do quick maths on the OTK calculations and stuff, and kind of know what you're doing, you can really take a lot of games off of great duelists with this deck. I really think it's that good. But this is a very different list than we've seen. His warrior lists typically ran Koichis, ran more of the Iron Blacksmith Kotetsu, ran the Axe of Despair, the equip spell as well. So that's kind of cool. I see he's kind of cut down on some of that. It seems like it's a bit more of kind of a, I don't know, just you're seeing standard good GOAT format cards and less of the equip spell. Seems like this deck is more focused on kind of grinding out your opponent, not as much on just hitting for 8,000 damage with Mataza. Maybe you kind of chip away at them with the Chaos Monsters and slowly gain advantage, start chipping away at their damage, and then at the right moment you can go for the True Nade and then try to finish them off. But the fact you're running Chaos Monsters can synergize with some of these equip spells such as United We Stand or Mage Power. I mean, you got a BLS with one of these bad boys attached, it's going to hurt, especially with True Nade to help clear it out. So if you're not familiar with what this whole idea is, Mataza is a warrior that allows you to attack twice, searchable off of Rhoda. Hits for 2,600 damage without any equip spells attached, but you add some extra attack power to it, and it can really hit for some damage very quickly. And then Iron Blacksmith Kotetsu allows you to search out an equip spell. Fun fact: Snatch Steal is an equip spell, so you can search out Snatch in a pinch with that card if you need, which is pretty cool. But I'm very interested to see why he went with the kind of more chaos version of this as opposed to the kind of standard warrior-ish list. Very cool to see this do well. Major shout out to Yada88. We see the big bangs and the Assure Priest combo coming in games 2 and 3 against Control, which is awesome because you can just OTK with that, which is awesome. And then the green kappas in the side, very interesting as well. Next, we get to Dropped Off, playing the Chaos Turbo strategy. Once again, a lot of similar things to what we saw at the World Championship. This seems to be the new trend, the metas and the GOATs in the side of the Turbo deck, as well as the Decrees. So this is looking a bit more similar to Ludo's deck from the World Championship, the World Championship winning. This might be exactly card for card. I don't know. I think the main deck looks pretty damn similar. Side deck might be a little different, but it looks pretty similar to me. So very similar list to Ludo. Next is Dueling High, once again with another top, playing the Warrior strategy, this time with the Jar of Greeds in the main deck. Only one Zambira this time. For the most part, this side deck looks pretty much the same with the Triple Spy, Mobiuses, the Wangoos. Interesting to see the Bottomlesses coming in, seeing this card coming more into favor in GOAT format recently, which is cool. John Wick, another top, once again, always up there. So yeah, kind of standard Chaos Turbo, I would say, for the most part. Only one Koichi, going with the Reaper in the main. Then we have JCVD, Jean-Claude Van Damme, playing the GOAT control strategy. This is who I had to play round 2. I won round 1. Then I had to play against JCVD in a control mirror. This man has thousands of games playing this deck, playing GOAT control, and it was not good. Game one, he just cooked me. He just absolutely grinded me out. Game 2, I really fought back. I was up in card advantage. He resolved an early morphing jar that got him ahead, but I fought back and fought back and fought back. And then he just went like True Nade, DMOC, and he was over. Absolutely destroyed me. So yeah, that was my introduction to playing control in a GOAT format tournament. Was had to play a control mirror against a great control player. It doesn't always go well for someone like me. So shout out to JCVD for a second place finish playing the control strategy. This is kind of a similar look at a list, at the type of list he's played over the years. It's always evolved slowly, card for card. But when you think of like JCVD, I think of GOAT control with DMOC. In the main deck, some variation on some of that. Typically, he runs Solemns in GOAT control as well. He's running 2 GOATs triple meta, which is an interesting ratio. Only 1 creature swap here. Kind of the lower monster count, the morphing jar, trying to set up these complicated game states where he can kind of grind you out in card advantage. Very great duelist. Shout out to JCVD. And then in first place, we have Evil for Life, or Scrub for Life, who has really emerged recently over the last few PWCQs. He's gotten a bunch of tops in the last few that he's played in. And it's nice seeing some fresh blood in the community do well. I mean, we see people like me who hop into the GOAT format world, and it takes forever to ever get a top in an event, and just slow progression and improvement. And then you have people like Scrub for Life who just come in and instantly start seeing success. First place finish at a PWCQ, earning the first invite of the year, which is awesome, despite there's people that have got grandfathered in previously from the other world championships, but the first earned invite in a tournament like this of the year, awesome to see. So congratulations to Scrub for Life. And what we're looking at here is pretty standard warriors for the most part. It's interesting. Ahead of Worlds, we were expecting a lot of this kind of thunderclap stuff. We're expecting these aggro decks to kind of look a bit different, but really what has kind of stood the test of time at the end of the day is the more standard warrior list that has been proven again and again. And so, looking at this list, we see the triple Blade Knight. Like I said, there's other ratios of this where people will cut these and put flips in there. But all this other stuff looks pretty standard. The 1 Faith in the main deck, double Kaiku. I like all these ratios. Looks really good. 1 Mind Control in the main, the 1 Book, great versatile card in many instances. Electing to go with the Dust Tornadoes in the main as well. Pretty standard warrior list. For the side deck, I like to go with 1 Ashura, 1 King Tiger against the control matchup. Interested why I decided to go 1 and 1. Obviously, Ashura can, the spirit monsters themselves can kind of conflict with your warrior strategy and your Blade Knights. But at the same time, just one of them I think is definitely good. So maybe that's why he elected to go with 1 and 1. Not 100% sure. The Mobius in the main, Zambara, of course. The Cypher Soldiers have definitely come back into fashion over the last few months against warriors. Double Spy, Smashing Walk, the Compulse once again, probably for control, and Bottomless back in the main deck, or back in the side deck again of some of these lists. Bottomless really coming into its own. Also depends on if you're going first or second sometimes when you bring in the Bottomless, because it's obviously a much better going first card. You don't want to draw it obviously after your opponent has already summoned a monster, but having this at the right time to shut off the chaos as well, that's an underrated part of this. It shuts off the aggro player's chaos. It shuts off their Call of the Haunted and their premature burials as well, which is really key. So major shout out to Evil for Life, Scrub for Life for the first place finish at the PWCQ. And that is it. I know that was long. I know I talked a lot. I know I said the same things about 8 times in a row. I apologize. This was kind of unscripted, just going with the flow. So that's all I got. Thank you all so much for watching and joining me here. Until the next one.